So, Sargon Akkad on his Thinkery channel released the new Labor Party, which I sat there and watched. I'll put a link in the description if you're interested to see it. And basically, imagine every single crazy left-wing Democratic loon that you've heard talk about during these Democratic debates. There you go. That's the British Labor Party. Now, this is why I have said that the left is pretty much universal here in America and also in Europe. It's the same talking points we've heard all the time. They sit there and talk about how colonization was a bad thing and how colonization never should have happened, and we destroyed communities and homes because of colonization. They also sat there and talked about how we need to give reparations for all the blacks because of colonization. They sat there and were talking about how black history is also British and European history, when the reality is it's not. Because what Malcolm X and Dr. Luther King was doing over here in America is American history, not British history. Now, yes, I understand that's probably a wide spectrum, and you could definitely sit there and say you're just taking what she said out of context. Yes, but the thing is, when you are looking at what they want this open, borderless world, of which one of the people in this conference even talked about Star Trek, which I'll get into that in a second. But anyway, since they want this open, borderless world where it's basically just a one government, one world, there are no nationalities, no identities, and all this other stuff. So, I mean, they're going to sit there and blame stronger African tribes conquering smaller African tribes and selling them to the Europeans as slaves. Yeah, that's our fault too. Now, it's not all the Europeans' fault. Did they play a hand in it? Absolutely. They bought the slaves, but it was bigger African tribes that were, well, they were going around and conquering smaller tribes. And, their beloved religion of Islam, well, it still practices slavery. Slavery is still legal in their countries. What can you do? Now, I can't go on about everything. It's the same stuff we've heard all the time. We gotta help these people. We gotta open the borders, We gotta have a government of love and compassion, and, we gotta fight the climate change, because, we gotta stop the racists. We gotta stop Tommy Robinson. What's the British Prime Minister's name? I forget his name right now. And, of course, there was some Orange Man bad in there as well. Not shocking. I understand that. It's just, God forbid that people have a nation of their own. Now, to go back to this Star Trek reference, look, Star Trek, you can't compare our world to Star Trek. You can't compare this fantasy they have of a one-world government to Star Trek. Now, Star Trek, there is a federation, and the federation is a giant, a government of planets. And, the Federation didn't form just like that. It took time. But the thing is, even in Star Trek's own lore, there's still planets that are human colonist planets, but they didn't want to be a part of the Federation because they wanted their own identity. In fact, there was an episode in Star Trek Generations where they were Irish folks, and they were living like in the 18th century style. That's how they lived. Now, they knew about, space travel and everything else, but they lived as Irish. Irish in the 1800s, wagons, coaches, horses, hay, that sort of stuff. That was in Star Trek. So even though the Federation was a massive government, there was still tons of other planets that were independent from the Federation. Now, as the series continued, you did see more and more species and planets join the Federation, mainly because of protection. It was kind of the whole, hey, there's this big bad thing, hey, we'll join you, just give us some troops to defend ourselves. So, The problem with that is if Labor and the Democrats get in power, they will just open the border. And the thing is, we the people that want a secured border, the people that want to keep a British nation for the British, an American nation for the Americans, hell, a France nation for the French, an Irish nation for the Irish, all that fun stuff, they're going to be called the racist. They're going to be called the misogynist, the xenophobist, the far right, the KKK, the xenophobe. I mean, oh my God. We've all heard it before, right? But the issue is, if you open these borders, you're going to have tons and tons of people just pour into the nations. And they're not necessarily going to assimilate. In fact, they probably won't want to assimilate. They, they, why would they? When you have this government just sitting there promising you, hey, come in, you can do this and you can do that. We'll give you all this free stuff, because diversity and conclusion, or whatever the fuck they said, they're not going to want to assimilate. Because, once again, why would they? All they got to do is cross the border and they get free access to everything off the backs of the taxpayer, of the actual citizens. It will also create, if they want to create more division and more, tensions in this nation, well, opening the border anywhere is a good way of doing it. Because if you have a bunch of people, foreigners, yes, foreigners coming into your nation, setting up shop, setting up camp, setting up their own little micro communities within the community, well, that's gonna cause a lot of people. Like in South Park, for example, there was that episode where a bunch of Mexicans, or was it the Future People? I think it was the Future People. They went into South Park and they started taking everyone's jobs because they needed money to send to the future. I forget the whole plot line, but it's it's all the working class South Parkians, the rednecks basically, that's where that term, they took our jobs, came from. But the thing is, why I'm referencing that is because it's accurate. Because you see, a lot of these migrants that are coming in, they're economic migrants here in America. And the same thing for Britain. They're economic migrants. They're here for work. They are here to get money. And if a business can hire this little non-English speaking person, you can call me racist for saying that, but if you're coming from Guatemala, you're probably not speaking English. But if you take this little Guatemalan and you just tell him, stay on a line and screw jars on for half of what you could pay for an actual citizen, companies are going to do it because it saves them money in the long run. And once again, that's going to create more hostilities in the work environment and in the nations. Because once again, back to South Park, they took our jobs. I mean, we have these people on the left that are sitting there saying, we need them. They do the jobs that we just don't want to. Look, if you honestly need to support your family, I think me and you, we all know and we all agree we'll do it. I worked a job that I hated for about 4 years until I got this job that I'm working now. And you know what? I'm glad I'm out of that job, but at the same time, I did that job because I needed the money. I needed the support. I needed the funding. The job sucked. The hours sucked. And it was terrible. But I still did it. Most people will do the terrible jobs to make sure that their houses are full and their houses are fed, even if it's gardening. The left seems that that's all these little migrants keep doing. Now, yes, do migrants typically have lower skill sets? Well, when they're economics, yes. And the thing is, especially if they're coming from a nation where they don't speak the national language, I mean, you can't necessarily put them on a phone hotline. I mean, you could, but the thing is, in Britain and in America, we speak English. So, what can you do? Look, y'all know it. I know it. They're absolutely crazy. And at the end of the video, there's a Jewish representative, I guess, up there talking about how Jews, they feel betrayed and they don't feel like they have a home anywhere and all this other stuff. Well, yeah, I kind of agree with him there. Now, his reasons were because, like, anti Semitism and Jewish conspiracies and the far right. No. In Britain, especially in London, the majority of population, well, I don't know if it's the majority, but there is a huge amount of Islamists living in London. And guess what? Islam is not a fan of the Jews. We hear them all the time in their home countries, in the Middle East, death to Israel, death to the Jews, and we hear it here on the left. Even in America, we have the freaking left sitting there saying, oh, Israel's this giant oppressor, they're attacking all these people, they're killing people. Why would the Jews feel safe? You have you have freaking Europe that's bringing in tons and tons of Islamists that, Islamists want to see the death of Israel. Now, is it all of them? No, but that goes into the assimilating. When you bring in tons of migrants from other nations and they don't assimilate, well, guess what? In those nations, if they're anti-Jewish, they're most likely going to be anti-Jewish in their new home. So, the Jews are facing that. And then in America, we have the left basically attacking the Jews, saying that they are just oppressors, conquerors, and all this other stuff. Yeah, I wouldn't feel safe if I was a Jew anywhere too, because it's like these governments are just turning against the Jews. It's, what does that remind me of back in 1930? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Well, 1930s. My apologies. As I say, if you want to watch it, watch it. I mean, it's the same stuff we hear all the time, but it's just the same politics. We got climate justice. One woman, was it a woman or was it a guy? I think it was a woman, but she was talking about how we need to help people. We got to help climate migrants now. Climate migrants, because where there's climate change, ecosystems are being destroyed and we're all dying. We got to bring these people in, because we got to fight the climate change. We got to save them. Idiots. You bring in more people of these climate migrants. Oh, guess what? They're just going to go to your nation and you're going to have to double your CO2 carbon emissions to increase, to reparate, your population is going to skyrocket, so that's more energy being used, more TVs on, more phones being charged. I mean, it's so simple. And plus, what's going to be the definition of a climate migrant? Oh no, the Middle East is just so hot. Let's bring them to Europe where we have winters and it's actually chilly. Or let's take them to America where states like Virginia, you can have 4 seasons in one day. Yeah, that happens. You see what I mean, though? These people, their religion of fighting climate change and their religion of a borderless world where everyone and anyone can just come and go, no problem, and everyone's just gonna go, hey, how's it going? Yeah, what's up, man? Well, guess what? There's a lot of languages in this world. There's a lot of different beliefs and religions and cultures in this world. You start smacking all these different variables together, it's going to be a new age of colonization. The very thing that they sit there and say, we can't have, we got to pay for the mistakes of colonialization. Yet what they're talking about is a new age of colonialization. A new age where nations are under one government, one type of world order. That sounds like colonization to me. One giant empire. This is why I say I am absolutely terrified when the left gets back into power. Yes, it's not an if anymore, it's a when. Because even if Donald Trump wins 2020, that's only 4 more years that we have. And I'm pretty sure by then the left will do anything and everything to get their power back. The stuff that they're sprouting, the average person does not agree with. The average person actually wants a nation, a home, a place that they can feel with their own people. We don't care what your skin color is. as long as you come in, accept our nation for our nation, and actually integrate with our values, we'll accept you. But even now, integration is now a problematic term, according to these assholes. So what, you're just going to have people come in and they're just going to colonize? Because, hey, we don't got to assimilate. We don't got to follow your laws. We just got to follow our laws. So fuck your nation and fuck everything about you. Our way is better. Look, I've said this once and I'll say it again. To a lot of these migrants, especially coming from the Middle East and parts of Africa, they're going from like a 2-star hotel, sometimes a 1-star hotel, to like a 5-star hotel or 4-star hotel. They don't want to go back home. They want to stay where they're at because quality of life is definitely better. And you have these politicians all over the world on the left wing that are advocating for more just. They think they can save the third world by just bringing everyone into the first world. But when the reality is that's just going to tear down the first world. Like, truthfully, it's just going to tear it down with everyone else. But hey, that's true equality, right? When everyone is at rock bottom and we're all scavenging for scraps, hey, but at least we're equal. And another thing they talked about was just the gender pay gap, and they were talking about how we need to be more sensitive for women in the workplace when they have their periods and when they're going through menopause and stuff like that. I mean, all I heard was we need to give women more power and we need to empower women much more to fight the patriarchy. Well, what happens when it's a feminarchy? Feminazi. I'll have to think about that one. Anyway, folks, I'll leave the link in the description. If you want to check it out, check it out. But what I just told you was just, it's a very fast, very quick summary. And if these loons get in power, before I go, that is one thing I want to say. They also talked about letting foreigners into the nation to vote. People who were there with no citizen status. They want to let them start voting. To me, that's just foreign meddling, because you can get a bunch of. Because the reality is, if you want to derail a nation, say like Russia, for example, if Russia wants to derail Europe, all of a sudden all these Russian immigrants can just come into Europe, or all these migrants can come into Europe, vote in these elections to get what they want instead of what the citizens want. And the left wing wants that. They want to allow that. So, I don't know what else to say, folks. Anyway, sorry if my voice still sounds raspy. This cold has just kicked my ass, but I'm going to try to start getting back in the swing of things. Alright, guys. See y'all later.